Morning and welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. A fine and fantastic to every one of you, wherever you're watching, listening, or watching. Thank you so much for making Locked On Grizzlies a part of your day. Another really fun game on Wednesday night. The Grizzlies' 9th win in 10 games. What really worked out for the Grizzlies and why they reached a new level as a winning basketball team. Plus, what lineups are really standing out over the past 10 games and what the Grizzlies need to do with an interesting setup coming tonight against Sacramento. That and much more on this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Here we go.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hope every one of you are having a fantastic Friday, and thank you for starting it off with the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. You can find me here at Stats SAC, credentialed media member with the Grizzlies. Have been covering the team now for 4 years. Your host here every single day with Locked On Grizzlies. Find the podcast wherever it's available: Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the Odyssey app, wherever you choose to listen. That's where we will be. And also right here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. Lets us know you enjoyed the show. Lets others be able to find the show, and just makes the overall experience that much better for everyone involved. Also want to remind you of our title sponsor for today. It's the holiday season, and there's probably some things out there you want to try out for free, but you don't want them to turn into unwanted cost. Try out Truebill today, a great way for you to be able to manage all your subscriptions and make sure free trials don't turn into hidden costs. So first off, want to certainly thank Chris Harrington of the Daily Memphian for taking time on Wednesday evening for our Thursday show to talk with us about all things Grizzlies, giving his perspective not only on the Zach Randolph experience overall with the documentary as well as the jersey retirement, but also the current, status of the Grizzlies, looking at what's making them successful and what could the near future hold. And in his opinion, it certainly is an encouraging one. The contention window's open now. It's time to win now. And that's exactly what the Grizzlies are doing. Wednesday night, the Grizzlies a 113-103 victory over the Portland Trail Blazers, their 9th win in 10 games. Now, the same 3 steps to success that I've kind of coined, I'm sure others have had. I'm not claiming that or anything, but their formula for victory, 3 steps to success, once again shine through. Desmond, Bane, and Dillon Brooks combined for 45, 50 points in the game, 45, I believe. The defense stepped up and played at an elite level for a significant stretch, but also the depth of the Grizzlies once again shined through. It was the Grizzlies bench on Wednesday night that stood out instead of the starting lineup, which we'll see is kind of rare, here later on in the show. But it was the Grizzlies bench, specifically Kyle Anderson, John Conchar, both who were in the plus 20s when it comes to the plus-minus rating in terms of their impact on the court. The Grizzlies' depth really stood up and stood out. And it was a bit odd, right? Because I had talked about on Wednesday that one of my keys to the game was Damien Lillard had struggled coming in to this game against the Grizzlies. He had struggled overall in his efforts against the Grizzlies this calendar year. So if the Grizzlies had the capability of being able to, limit him like they had and make sure nobody else stood up to really take over that CJ McCollum type of productivity, the Grizzlies should be in a good position to win. Well, actually, the Trailblazers did have a couple of players who stepped up. Norman Powell, 25 points. Anthony Simons, 22 points. Simons has had an absolutely outstanding year off the bench for Portland. But the big thing is that the Grizzlies were able to weather that storm, and they were able to close the game out late. Because if you want proof that basketball is a game of runs, look no further than Wednesday night. Portland in the first few minutes starts off with a 13-4 run. Then the Grizzlies score Portland basically, I think, 51-33 for the rest of the half, a 55-48 halftime lead. Well, then Portland comes back and goes on a 30-13 run and takes, at one point, the Portland Trailblazers were up 78-68 with just over 3 minutes left to go in the third quarter, but that's when the Grizzlies hit the run button. What I mean by that is that's when the Grizzlies were able to put together one of their patented runs through this overall successful stretch of wins that they've had over their past 10 games. The Grizzlies outscored the Trailblazers 45-25 over the past 15 minutes to be able to go from 10 down to 10 up at the end of the game for the win. And a couple of things about that stand out. Number one is that the level of confidence, the level of ability to win or play as a winner is continuing to improve for the Grizzlies. You know, at the first of this stretch without Ja, when we beat the Kings and, when we beat the Raptors and so on, you kind of look at it and you're like, okay, this team is putting in a lot of effort. They're finding ways to win. And then as you get towards, that stretch where, they've won 4 or 5 in a row, you're kind of like, okay, now this team is starting to really put together a formula, which is, Desmond, Dillon, Jaren, 2 of those 3 stepping up, the defense playing at an elite level, the bench being able to make a difference as well, despite being without some of its best regulars who are either starting or out due to injury. But now over the past few games, what you're really starting to see, this Grizzlies team has the swagger of a winner. And what I mean by that is that the Grizzlies aren't going into these games, just, overconfident to where, they're not going to put forth their best effort because they know at some point it's just going to come to them. This Grizzlies team is playing hard, but they also with confidence know that at some point they're going to figure it out and they're going to go on a significant stretch to be able to win games. And that's exactly what happened in the final part of the third quarter and into the fourth quarter on Wednesday night. But the other thing that stood out was that it wasn't just one Grizzlies player that stood up and was the best player over that stretch. It's basically like the Portland Trailblazers and the Grizzlies were running a 4x100 relay, where they hand off the baton in the Olympics, and Portland had got off to a head start. But Kyle Anderson, he kept the Grizzlies close in the third quarter. Then he handed off the baton to Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane, he was the one who allowed the Grizzlies to take the lead in the first part of the fourth quarter, and then he handed it off to Dillon Brooks, and then Dillon Brooks is the one that took it the rest of the way home. And so over the last 15 minutes of the game on Wednesday night, it was Kyle Anderson, it was Desmond Bane, and it was Dillon Brooks who took turns being the best player on the court, and that's what made the difference for the Grizzlies. So once again, Desmond and Dillon stepping up. Dillon's third straight game with 20 points. He's taken on more of a scoring load to where Jaren maybe has taken a bit of a step back. You expect Jaren, obviously, to get back going just fine. But that trio, 2 of those 3, 9 in and 9 out, combining for 45-plus points. The defense being elite and the depth also as well. But, we've talked about Killian Tilly. We talked about DeAnthony Melton. I've hinted at John Conchar, who has been unconscious from 3 over the past several games. But I also want to give a big, big credit to Kyle Anderson. Since Kyle Anderson has come back from being out with a back injury, Kyle Anderson is a plus 62 on the floor over his past 4 games. A plus 62. And he's getting back to where he is consistently being a source of positivity on the court. And a big reason why is because over the past 3 games, we're starting again to see the Kyle Anderson, the slow-mo of all trades, if you will. The Kyle Anderson who can contribute in so many ways. 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals. Those are his lines over the past few games, including 2 blocks. So just a very good overall across-the-board productive game against Portland, and he was a huge reason why the Grizzlies were able to get that victory. So once again, it's the Grizzlies have in their starting lineup, the Grizzlies have several different people stepping up at different times, but also off their bench, it's one person or another. It's DeAnthony Melton one game, Kyle Anderson another game, the combination of Killian Tilly and Xavier Tillman another game. So many different players can step up and deliver in big moments for this Grizzlies team, and that's why they're consistently winning. But over this winning streak, what lineups have really been productive? And there is a constant figure that has been in the Grizzlies' best defensive lineups over the past 10 games. It may surprise you who it is. We'll discuss that in just a moment. But before we do that, want to discuss Truebill. Truebill, as I mentioned at the start of the show, is a great source for you because it's the holiday season. We love being able to have, say you're a good cook and you want to subscribe to different options, to different maybe online magazines or what have you about different menus, but you just want to do it through the holiday season. You want to do a free trial, and after that, you're done. Well, the problem is that a lot of times things like that could actually be scams. And they're just simple ways for those free trials to turn into hidden costs that you don't want. Well, if that's the case, Truebill's a great source for you, because what it allows for you to do is it allows for you to keep up with your subscriptions all in one place. And Truebill will let you know when free trials come, when they're about to start charging you, so you can end them. On average, Truebill saves its users $720 a year. Check out Truebill.com right now. Go to Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA and check out a great source, not only to help you manage your free trials, but also manage your subscriptions overall. Check out Truebill.com today. So the great thing about the Grizzlies is that they have been playing consistently. But of course, what has stood out about this team has been its defense. I asked Chris Harrington on yesterday's episode, what is the true identity of this team? And he mentioned that he felt that offense may be a bit more important, basically. But this team, it seems like the strength of this team is certainly their defense. They're some of their most significant players right now, Dillon Brooks and Jaren Jackson Jr., they are playing more consistently elite on defense than they are on offense, and it's showing, right? It is showing with just how productive they have been. But the thing about it is that when it comes to Dillon Brooks and when it comes to Jaren Jackson Jr., yes, they have consistently been among the best defensive players, and they've been among the best defensive combos in the league. I talked about it the other day, how when Dillon Brooks and Jaren Jackson are on the court together, the Grizzlies defense plays like it's among the best in the league. But when they're off the court, the Grizzlies defense plays like it's the worst, and that certainly does stand out. But I think credit also has to be given to the starting lineup as a whole. Since Thanksgiving, of all the five-man lineups that have played 75 or more minutes together since Thanksgiving, the Grizzlies starting lineup has the third best net rating in basketball. And they also have the best defensive rating. Now, this isn't of starting lineups. This is of lineups that have played 75 or more minutes together, basically over every team in the NBA's last 10 games. Since Thanksgiving, the Grizzlies starting lineup has the third best net rating and the best defensive rating. So they've honestly been one of the best starting lineups in basketball. And of course, the reason why, again, is because of Dillon Brooks and Jaren Jackson Jr. However, it also must be mentioned the other three players. You've got the overall consistency in playmaking in Tyus Jones, the shooting of Desmond Bane, and the consistent rebounding as well as physical play of Steven Adams. You've got a starting lineup that complements each other so well, but truly does shine on the defensive end of the court. But while we talk about Dillon Brooks and we talk about Jaren Jackson Jr., a little further look, a little bit more of a deep dive into some lineup data for the Grizzlies, it starts to make clear that there is another player who really is consistently he frequently is involved with the Grizzlies' best defensive lineups that they put out there on a nightly basis through this stretch of winning. And his name is Steven Adams. It absolutely is true. While I won't say that Steven Adams is to the level of defensive impact of Dillon or to the level of defensive impact of Jaren, the frequency of him being involved in the Grizzlies' best defensive lineups, it actually is higher. That frequency is higher than Dillon or Jaren. For instance, of all the Grizzlies' three-man combinations that have played 50 or more minutes together since Thanksgiving, of all those three-man combinations, the three-man combinations with the 10 best defensive ratings, all 10 of those combinations include Steven Adams. That's correct. That is no lie. You did not mishear that. Of any three-man combinations that the Grizzlies have put out there in terms of lineups since Thanksgiving, the 10 best three-man combinations in terms of defensive rating all include Steven Adams. And the lineup data also backs this up. The on-off data also backs this up. When Steven Adams is on the court with Dillon Brooks and Jaren Jackson Jr. so far this year, the Grizzlies are allowing 94 points per 100 possessions to their opponents. That is in the 100th percentile of NBA lineups. That is incredible, according to Cleaning Glass. When Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Steven Adams are on the court together so far this year, we're not talking about among the best in the NBA. We're talking about that when the Grizzlies have those three players on the court so far this year, they arguably have been the best defensive team. Now, it certainly has been mainly because of the play as of late, but it's where they are currently right now to where how effective this defense is with Dillon on the perimeter, Jaren Jackson Jr. kind of being a rover, being able to create havoc, on the perimeter and the post, and Steven Adams in the paint. It's clear how much of an impact he's making. Again, when Steven Adams is on the court with Jaren Jackson Jr. and Dillon Brooks in non-garbage time situations, the Grizzlies are averaging 94 points allowed to their opponents per 100 possessions, which is in the 100th percentile in the NBA. When Dillon and Jaren are off, or when Dillon and Jaren are on the court, and Steven Adams is off. Remember, when Dillon, Jaren, and Steven are on, they're allowing 94 points per 100 possessions. But when Steven Adams is off and Dillon and Jaren are still on, they're averaging 109 points per possession. The Grizzlies are 15 points better against their opponents when Steven Adams is on the court with Dillon and Jaren than when he's off the court. That's how impactful Steven Adams has been. And so it doesn't matter if and for those that may say, well, that's because he's playing with Dillon and Jaren, that's not necessarily that accurate. Because, again, of all the three-man combinations, it's just one combination is Dillon, Jaren, and Steven. Again, it's not Dillon, it's not Jaren, it's Steven Adams, who is frequently among the Grizzlies' best defensive lineups over this stretch of play. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Steven Adams is more impactful than Dillon. He's more impactful than Jaren. But what I will say is that trio complements each other very well, covering the different responsibilities that are there on defense, and it's shining through on a consistent basis. Another thing that Steven Adams really helps out with, of course, is limiting the offensive rebound of the opposing team, while also he has gotten significantly better. Even if his blocks have not increased significantly, his overall impact on altering shots, making it difficult for players to be able to find their way into the lane, and blocking shots in general has certainly improved. And at the end of the day, the other cool thing that stands out is that the three-man combination of Jaren Jackson Jr., Steven Adams, and DeAnthony Melton, that actually is the second best three-man combination in the NBA in terms of net rating since Thanksgiving. So you've got a lot of different players who are contributing to the Grizzlies having some of the best lineup combinations out there in the NBA, but it's Steven Adams who stands out as a player who's gotten accustomed to his teammates, has gotten acclimated to schemes, and he took a bit of an adjustment period, right? Well, that adjustment period, ever since the Grizzlies have gotten about a month into the season, Steven Adams has really stepped up and delivered. And even if it's not a double-double each night, or if it's not 15 points, 15 rebounds, you see outside the box score, Steven Adams is still having a big impact. And it's great to see how much of, how productive it's been in helping the Grizzlies win. Well, tonight, that's exactly what the Grizzlies are going to need to do. But the key is if they play. I'll discuss that in just a moment as the Grizzlies head to play the Sacramento Kings. But before I do that, I want to talk about Built Bar. Listen, I talk about the Grizzlies all the time in terms of options, in terms of the fact that they have so many different options they can feature on a nightly basis on both ends of the court to lead to victories. Well, if you're a fan of having options, Built Bar is a great thing for you because the source remains the same. No matter what taste you go into, Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Have it in the morning for breakfast, have it in the afternoon as a snack. Whenever you choose to listen, whatever you choose to enjoy Built Bar, it's going to be a great part of your day. But if you're someone that enjoys options, you have over 18 different flavors you can choose at BuiltBar.com. And if you go, or at Built.com, and if you go to Built.com, not only can you choose from those flavors, you also can enjoy 15% off by using the promo code LOCKED15. Again, go to Built.com, put in the promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off your next order from Built Bar. The other thing I can tell you is that right now, it's probably with confidence that you want to bet on the Grizzlies. But if you enjoy betting and wagering on sports in general, you may want to check out betonline.ag, the fastest and easiest way for you to be able to bet on your favorite sports, the NBA, the NHL, the NFL, UFC, whatever you choose to enjoy to bet on, BetOnline is going to have you covered. And for right now, if you go on via your mobile device or laptop, you go and you put in the promo code locked on, you'll get 50% off. You'll get 50, not 50% off. You'll get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Check out betonline.ag today. On a special episode of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast tomorrow, a special Saturday episode, we will go into the details of what has been successful for the Grizzlies on this West Coast road trip, review the game against Sacramento if the game does occur. Plus, look at how the Grizzlies really get into a tough stretch of games around the Christmas holiday. That and much more on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. I'll stipulate it. If the Grizzlies play a game, we'll certainly have a Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Maybe not necessarily if they don't, but that is the big key. That's the big narrative going into tonight's game. As of right now, which is Friday morning, it certainly does appear as if there will be a game. But the Sacramento Kings have certainly been one of the teams all around the NBA, as Dave stated. So we'll take a step back for a minute. Obviously, as we Grizzlies fan know, Ja Morant has been in health and safety protocols now for over a week, I believe. And Dillon Brooks also was in it for a short period of time, but Dillon Brooks was able to, get the 2 negative tests within 24 hours, only missed 1 game, and so he was not that impacted. The Grizzlies have not been impacted that much by COVID, but with it now being the winter season, it did seem like that this could be a possibility. The NBA, a lot like the NFL over the past week, there have been several teams that have been highly impacted by COVID. We know the Bulls have certainly been a team that's been impacted by it. And over the past 36 hours, it's the Sacramento Kings who have been impacted by it as well. Because of this, the NBA and the Players Association came out yesterday and they agreed that starting around the holiday season through the new year in 10 or so days into January, they're going to get back to the COVID testing, to the mask that they had last year in order to try to thwart the overall spread of COVID, and hopefully not having to cancel games. They've already had to postpone a few games for the Bulls this year, but the Kings are starting to trend towards that territory where if they get 1 or 2 players today who for some reason are put in health and safety protocols, then we may get to the point to where the NBA may have no choice but to postpone tonight's game versus the Kings and the Grizzlies. If you go back to last year, if you remember in January of last year, I believe that there was a game against the Kings that was canceled then because of the Grizzlies having to take, 12 total days off because they had so many of their players out due to health and safety protocols. Well, now it's not the Grizzlies, but it's the Kings. As a matter of fact, currently, as of right now, Terrence Davis, Marcus Bagley, De'Aaron Fox, Alex Len, and Lewis King all are in health and safety protocols, and that includes interim head coach Alvin Gentry, who was not going to be able to coach tonight's game anyway for being in health and safety protocols as well. But you also have to consider that players like Tyrese Halliburton, as well as Rashawn Holmes and others, they're dealing with injuries to where they were already potentially questionable to doubtful for tonight's game. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Now, don't get me wrong. The Kings certainly are still a formidable opponent with Davion Mitchell, Buddy Hield, Harrison Barnes, among others, who certainly can definitely make a game interesting and can have, excellent games of their own. But the Kings, if the game does happen tonight, at the very least are going to be severely shorthanded. And while you definitely don't like to see, you wish everyone that's involved with health and safety protocols nothing but the best. You hope the best for their health, and it's not fun to see NBA teams impacted by COVID at all. In terms of the game itself, if the Kings are to be severely shorthanded, that actually could play to the Grizzlies' advantage with how they're winning games right now, because the Kings already struggle when it comes to limiting production in the lane. They allow they allow the most 2-point field goals of any team in the NBA. They allow their opponents to score more field goals inside the arc than anyone in the NBA. They are the second worst team in terms of limiting offensive rebounds in the NBA. And then also they are 24th in allowing opponents to get to the line. So we're talking about a team that's last in terms of defending twos, second to last in terms of allowing offensive rebounds, and near bottom 5 when it comes to allowing their opponents to go to the free throw line. In other words, this is the team, the Kings. The Grizzlies have found an opponent that is among the most vulnerable when it comes to attacking the rim. The Grizzlies have every reason tonight to once again promote getting into the paint, being productive, and being aggressive on the boards. This is the type of game where you hope Steven Adams can step up and have an extremely productive night, where Jaren Jackson Jr., as the Grizzlies will likely have a size advantage with so many of the Sacramento Kings' bigger bodies potentially being out, you feel Jaren Jackson Jr. can find his stride inside the 2-point line. You hope that the Grizzlies' ability to produce in the lane inside the arc can open up the 3 more for finding some easier shots. And if you can complement the twos with the threes, perhaps the Grizzlies can get a good hold of the game early and be able to get a comfortable lead and maintain that lead. But the Grizzlies should find some success tonight, not only getting into the lane and being able to find high percentage shots, but also being able to attack the boards and get some offensive rebounds to gain extra possessions and to gain extra opportunities at points. And even if one of those two things don't work out, you've got the added layer of confidence where the Sacramento Kings do foul quite a bit. The Grizzlies should have the confidence of wanting to get into the lane. And if for some reason the high percentage shot's not there, if they were to get fouled, they get to the free throw line. But the key, of course, is making their free throws. And then also, once again, on defense, the Grizzlies may be able to have a better opportunity to make the Sacramento Kings shoot the three. The Kings have been in the bottom third of the league when it comes to three-point shooting over their past 10 games. Buddy Hield, who obviously started off the year as one of the best three-point shooters in the league, he's only shooting 25% from three, despite, I believe, 7 or 8 attempts a night over the past 10 games. He's not found his stroke at all. If the Grizzlies can make sure to contest shots on defense, they should be able to create enough turnovers and also be able to protect the lane again with having the size advantage to where they can force the Kings into some less than ideal shot attempts from distance. And if that's the case, the Grizzlies can get out on the run quite a bit and get some baskets and get some looks inside the lane before the Sacramento Kings defense is set. So if the Grizzlies can simply play what has been so successful for them over the past few weeks, finding advantages on the run and in the paint, if they can do that again tonight, I feel there's a very good chance that they should be able to win, especially if they could complement their play inside with high percentage looks from three for Bane, Dillon, and others. And then the Grizzlies can complement that by playing very good defense, making sure that they protect the lane and then get out to contest jump shots that the Kings may have to settle for. That's going to be the key to victory tonight for the Kings against the Grizzlies. But at the end of the day, you certainly hope nothing for the best, but for all players that are impacted by COVID when it comes to the Kings and the rest of the NBA. But for the Grizzlies in particular, if it seems like it's going to be a less than safe situation, if the game needs to be canceled or postponed or cancel it, let's do all that we can to make sure that the situation doesn't get any worse. And hopefully, obviously, if the Grizzlies and Kings do play tonight, there won't be any type of fallout that leads to potentially more players being in health and safety protocols afterwards. So a good opportunity tonight for the Grizzlies to make it 10 out of 11 games, for them to have swept another West Coast road trip, 2 games on the West Coast, and for them to really have taken advantage of a manageable part of the schedule before the Grizzlies get into a very tough schedule to end the year. So if the Grizzlies can simply keep playing like they've been playing over the past 3 weeks tonight, on the run, in the paint, playing good defense, creating turnovers and getting offensive rebounds, they should have the opportunity to do that quite a bit tonight. If they do, I feel they're going to have a very good chance to win the game. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Again, if the game tonight does happen, we'll probably have a special Saturday edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast for you. If not, we'll talk to you again on Sunday. But until then, enjoy the Grizzlies. Hope you have a safe and happy weekend before Christmas, and we'll talk to you again soon here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.